The Rebel Capitalist Show.
I talk about real estate all the time, and I'm someone who started investing in real estate in 2012 when I retired. But then in 2015, I started investing in real estate overseas in Medellin, Colombia, a place that I'm sure you're very familiar with. And people ask me about Dubai. They ask me about real estate all over the world. And I say, listen, I can't give you a really great opinion because I need to go there. I need to be there physically for at least 2 or 3 months and do that boots on the ground research. Because if you don't do that, just looking at stuff on the internet, you really got no clue. Is it the same with the type of investing you do as stocks and bonds, or is that more specific to real estate?
I think probably real estate is an even higher degree of localization. So it's very, very important to get the lay of the land, as you point out. But it's also very important in my business, I think, as a fundamentalist-driven investor. I mean, if you're a chartist and you're just watching the way that prices move and the psychology that applies to all markets, with equities and bonds, you can get that just from looking at the internet. But if you're a fundamentalist driven guy like me, I mean, I like to have a longer time frame with my investments. And, I think it's valuable for clients that I'm there on the ground doing stuff for them. Now, I first came back to Tanzania just as a tourist 3 years ago. And that was when it all started for me to sort of get a feel for the place and understand the way that the business environment is and so on and so forth. And that would have never happened by looking on the internet, right?
Yeah, right.
You land and all of a sudden you're seeing, all these signs and advertisements. And, I like to see what little mom and pop stores are selling, what the popular products are, what the big billboard advertisements are, for beer or cars or whatever. So it's really important to be on the ground as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you know what my secret is I would always go to the local mall. Whenever I went to a place for the first time, and this is what I did in Australia before I retired, I grew my business into Sydney and Melbourne, most of the areas in Australia and Singapore and a lot of different places overseas. But I'd have the driver take me right to the main mall because I'd want to see, how the people were spending money, what the energy was like, what the vibe was like, what the anchor stores were. And that in and of itself would tell me like 90% of what I needed to know to determine if I wanted to do business there.
Makes total sense. Yeah. That's big part of the boots on the ground research that I also do. But Tanzania was the original impetus for this. And we've allocated about 50% of the fund to Tanzania at this point. I've also spent time in Kenya. I have some good contacts in Rwanda and Uganda, but I haven't actually been there physically myself. Thankfully, with all the technology these days, we have lots of conferences and meetings and things done over Zoom. So part of the process in my fund is to actually speak with management once I've made an initial decision that I'm interested in investing something.
What's the real estate like there, Tim?
So Tanzania, unfortunately, was a socialist country when it when it gained its independence. So in Tanzania, the government still owns everything, and you can only get long-term lease on stuff.
Oh, like a 99-year lease or something?
Yeah, and as a non-citizen, you can only get a lease on something that's incidental to running your business. So, I mean, if you ran a B&B or a boutique hotel and you lived on site, that'd be fine. But you can't actually own something yourself as an investor. But there are plenty of other countries around the region where you can. The one I have direct experience with is Kenya. I had a bit of a look around when I was in Nairobi. I don't know whether you've ever been to Nairobi or whether any of your viewers and listeners have, but it's capital city of Kenya. Not as big as Dar es Salaam, where I am now in terms of population, but it's, it's a proper city. And it sits almost on the equator up at altitude. So it's a bit like Medellin and these places where it has this eternal spring type climate.
Yeah.
And
it's close to Kilimanjaro too, isn't it?
Exactly. That's right. Just up the road. And it's really pleasant climate all year round. Beautiful gardens, it almost looks like England, and it was a British colony, and the old joke is, the English brought all their plants with them and, nice gardens and things. But long story short, Nairobi had an overbuilding real estate boom sort of in the early 2010s through, I think, 2017 is when the market kind of came off. And still in the doldrums. For local people, most of the stuff that they built is too expensive, so there's no demand for it. But if you go there as a non-local with a higher level of income and you're used to higher prices, everything seems really cheap. To me especially.
Do you know what it is approximately price per square meter?
You could pick up a really nice apartment in one of the nice leafy suburbs of Nairobi, from what I could tell, for $750, $800 per square meter.
That's
for
cheap.
a big apartment. Yeah.
That's
for
cheap.
the smaller ones, the per square meter price probably goes up a little bit.
Yeah, right.
But it's a function of this overbuilding, and then it's not easy to get finance. Mortgages are basically non-existent by our standards, so it's probably more of a cash market. And then unfortunately for non-residents, there is a fairly hefty withholding tax on rental income. So I don't know how the numbers stack up as an investor, but what I thought to myself was, if I wanted to base myself in Nairobi for a couple of years, which is a possibility down the line, I could buy a really nice apartment to live in and use it. And then hopefully in 5-10 years time, when the market's cleared, it would have also appreciated nicely. That was kind of how I thought about the real estate there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've done a little bit of homework on Nairobi, and this was back in 2017, or no, this would have been 2015 or so. I was thinking about buying a hotel. And I think I was in Medellin or Ecuador at the time, something like that. And I said, okay, I don't care where I go on the entire planet. I'm just going to keep it wide open. And so what metric can I use? So the metric I came up with was the average wage relative to the average price of a hotel room on a nightly basis. And I used that as kind of a ratio. So obviously I wanted the maximum price for a hotel room per night, and then the minimum average wage. Right. And Nairobi was right at the top, because they were charging like $200-300 a night for a hotel room, but yet wages there are very, very, very low, similar to what you'd have in like Medellin. And I remember they were really good. I can't recall some of the others, but I remember I was going to go to Croatia. That was one on my list. So I actually went to Croatia, and then I ended up going down to Montenegro, and I was supposed to go to Nairobi, but I ended up staying in Montenegro for probably 3 or 4 months. Yeah, because I liked it so much, just on a personal level. But so is it still like that? Is that something that you've noticed?
Yeah, so I spent some time there with my family, and probably the room rates have also come down. There were probably a lot of completions of hotels and service apartments in the late 2010s that knocked that down. And COVID probably also had an impact. But we were in a 2-bedroom serviced apartment, brand new. It wouldn't have been out of place in Singapore, honestly. I mean, it was nicely finished and decked out. And we were paying only like $150 a night. So that's kind of more of a value story. But yeah, the fancy hotels, I think, are still able to charge a premium.
But $150 a night. I mean, if you had an 80% occupancy rate at $150 a night, it's $750 a square meter. I mean, that's I don't have the math right in front of me, but I can tell just by my experience in real estate that's going to be a great return.
Yeah.